My name is, hello everyone, my name is William Elwood Greaves Jr., son of William Elwood Greaves Sr. My grandfather's name was William Edward Greaves, and his father, Joshua Greaves, was one of the people who came on the Brig Cora. He came as a teenager with his family, and his father, Thomas Henry Greaves, and his mother, Adelaide Hall Greaves, are the ones who brought their whole family with them in 1865 to this new place called Liberia, because of the promise of a better situation for themselves. My great-great-grandfather, Thomas Henry Greaves, was of Irish descent. We're not absolutely sure like how far removed he was from Ireland, whether he was half Irish or quarter or octoroon or you know how many generations. We suspect it was only 1 or 2 generations back that his ancestors came from Ireland. We believe around the time of the potato famine, and they moved to the West Indies. We believe his folks moved straight to Barbados, but it's possible that they bounced around the islands before ending up in Barbados. So we don't have a record for how he got to Barbados, but we do have a record of him marrying Adelaide Hall. And from our history or our research, we believe that her parents were either former slaves or freed slaves or something of that nature. And so he being a mulatto and she being not a mulatto, it's very likely that they were having difficulty with their the two of them being together in that country and with their prospects for themselves and their family. And so we suspect that that's why they made the decision to take the offer of coming to Liberia in 1865 on the Brig Cora. So Thomas Henry Greaves came, and he and his, like I said, his teenage son, and I believe there were 4 other siblings who came. So his family of 6 or 7, I believe. And they came and they quickly moved to Grand Bassa County. They apparently, he was a tailor, and I believe she was a seamstress. And I guess when they went to Crozierville and saw the 25 acres that was earmarked for them, I think they believed it was upcountry, so they chose not to stay that far outside. And also because of their trade, being tailors, they needed to be where all the action was, where people would not come out in the hinterland to find a tailor. You had to be in town to get the business. So they ended up moving to Bassa County, and that's where we know our Greaves family, most of them grew up. My father, I know, grew up there. I do know that my great-grandfather Joshua, I believe he was a merchant, and as I mentioned, he was roughly 17 or 18 when he arrived on the Cora. He ended up going to Sierra Leone. I don't know how long he stayed there, but he came back at some point with a wife. His wife was a half Sierra Leonean, half French woman named Catherine Burdett Greaves. And so she and he came and they moved to Grand Bassa County. And then that's where they gave birth to my grandfather, William Edward Greaves, and his many siblings. And he was, among many other things, he was a commissioner of customs. That's the position that most people remember him being. And I think a claim to fame, if you want to call it that, for him was that he was one of Liberia's delegation to the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II in 1952. So, and I believe there are only 2 people, I believe, who were on that delegation at the time. And as it turns out, during when he went for that trip, he actually wanted to investigate his Irish roots. And so after the coronation, he took a trip to Ireland, to County Cork, and tracked down this lady who he believed to be his great aunt, and introduced himself. And she saw this, black young gentleman showing up at her door, and she was very leery at first. But when he introduced himself and explained why he was there and why he thought they were related, she actually remembered her ancestor, or one of her 1 or 2 generations before relatives going to the West Indies from Ireland, and so she embraced him fully as her long lost nephew come back to visit. And unfortunately, we lost. That's a story that my father told, my aunt has told, my uncle has told me, but no one knows the lady's name. No one has any direct connection with her. So we have the story, but we don't know the person. So we my grandfather was able to make that connection, but now we've sort of lost it. So we're trying to sort of rekindle that Irish connection for ourselves. So we know that our folks came from Ireland to Barbados, and we know that certainly on my great-great-grandmother's side, Adelaide Hall, that there's a whole string of the Hall side of the family that stayed in Barbados. And in fact, the last time I was there in Barbados, the first time, also the last time, for my 25th wedding anniversary, we did some investigation and found some information, got some names of some of our Barbadian ancestors on the Hall side, and we hope to be able to run down some of those threads so that the next time I'm there, which will hopefully be very soon, I'll be able to actually, shake hands and talk to some of them in person. So that's kind of a very broad, big picture of the Greaves family and our connection to Barbados. So my father was a diplomat for Liberia. He started off working at Raymond, the mine in Buchanan, and then went to the Foreign Service Institute. He also went to Georgetown School of Foreign Service. He was one of, I've heard different stories. I don't believe he was the first Black graduate. In fact, I'm pretty sure he wasn't. I'm also pretty sure he wasn't the first African, but he was certainly one of the first Africans or people of color to graduate from the Georgetown School of Foreign Service. I spent a total of 6 years of my life in Liberia. From the year I was born till I was 3. Then my father got his station in Paris, and we all moved there when I was 3. And then we came back in 1978 when I was 12, and stayed 3 years. We're there for the coup, and then my father was, he all through the coup, all through everything, he said he was a servant of Liberia. He didn't serve a particular president or anything, so that was his whole thing. And in fact, when the coup occurred, he was, I believe, the first member of the Foreign Service to come back to Liberia, because everybody was recalled. And so he came back, and he ended up teaching at the Liberia's, foreign education service. That's not the name for it. I'm sorry. But so that's where and then he ended up being stationed or commissioned to come to the U.S. And that's how I ended up here. Finished high school here, and then did college, and life, the rest of life here. So because of that, because of only being in Liberia for years 1, 2, 3, and then from age 12, I really didn't know my grandfather. My grandfather died when I was 10. So I didn't get back to Liberia till I was 12. I was there from age 0 to 3. I came back for vacation, I believe once when I was maybe 5 years old, and I got to see him then. But other than that, that was my interaction with my grandfather. And obviously we didn't have the same type of communication vehicles that we have now, where you can FaceTime, and even phone calling was expensive, so you didn't get very regular phone calls with people either. So I did not have I have very little recollection of my grandfather. So most of what I know is from what people have told me of him. And again, he was in the military, as I recall, but the main position that people remember him for is as the Commissioner of Customs. My father, as I said, he came up through the ranks at the in the diplomatic ranks. He was a second secretary in France, was promoted to first secretary and consul in England to the Court of St. James, and we were there for 4 years. Then he was moved to Kenya, and we were in Kenya for several years, for 2 years actually. Then we came back to Liberia for a few years, and he was involved in the preparations for the OAU summit. And then the year right after the summit, he was stationed as a head of mission in Central Africa. So he went to the Central African Republic, and that's where he was when the coup occurred. And as I mentioned, he was, he and all the other diplomats were recalled by the PRC government, and he was the first to return. I, at the time, had gone to J.J. Roberts, graduated from there in 9th grade, and when the coup happened, I believe I was in 10th grade. Yeah, I had just gotten to CWA in 10th grade. So my father was there, stayed in Liberia for many years, was there through the war. He was teaching at the Foreign Service Institute, and ended up when the world wars happened in Liberia, the Civil War. He was one of those who got caught and had to basically walk and hitchhike and find their way out of Liberia. And there were, many. There were several months where we had not heard from my mother, my father, or my little brother who was with them at the time. And but they made it out and made it to Ghana, because my mother is from Ghana. That's he went when he was working for Raymond Corporation. He went to Ghana and met this beautiful Ghanaian lady and married her, and took her around the world. And as it's funny how there's a lot of symmetry and poetry sometimes in life, because my father took my mother from her home in Ghana, and then his final posting was actually as the Liberian ambassador to Ghana, and so that's where he passed away. Yeah, he's passed away in Ghana, and he's buried there. My father was a very pragmatic person. He always told us, he said, if I go to visit China and I die in China, bury me in China. Don't care my body nowhere else, wherever I am. He said, because my spirit will not be in that place, my spirit going to God. So that was his mindset. So he said, wherever my body ends up, that's where you should bury me. And then if you want to remember me, I'll be with you wherever you are. So yeah, so he ended up, like I said, there was some symmetry and some poetry to it. He died in the place where he picked up his bride. He dropped her right back off, hopefully in better condition, and then he left her. He brought her, and that's where she is now. So trying to think of the happiest memories of my father, kind of hard, because So my father was it's funny. He was a disciplinarian to us, to his children, but he had a wicked sense of humor that even we as children could recognize. And so there were just so many things that happened that, you know, we would have really good laughs. There were family vacations we took. You know, driving was, I remember in Paris, we would drive down to places like Brittany and just, you know, I remember going to a farm, never been on a farm before. I remember we drove down to a farm and there I was milking cows for the first time. Never, yeah. I was like, yeah, I am, you know, why am I milking cows? But anyway, I just remember breakfast was delicious that day. And I felt like I played a part in doing that. But there were just so many different memories, and I think the home that my parents created, because I can't mention my father without mentioning my mother. The home they created was a home not only for us, their biological children, but there are so many relatives who came through, you know, at different times and either stayed with us, you know, short term, some longer term, and I you know, I think one of the legacies for me is I tell people, and it's still true to this day, that my siblings and I don't think have ever had any real arguments, and that's not to say that we don't disagree with each other on things, but we've never really had arguments. And I think part of that was because we moved around, you know, as diplomats. You know, when you go to the next place, the only people who you know are the people you came with. And so we established these very close bonds with each other, and you know, fostered by our parents, obviously, and we've carried that throughout our lives. So if that's it's not quite the fondest memory, but I think that maybe the greatest legacy for me is that legacy of the connection we have with our family and the home that they created for us, and we try to mimic that to the degree that we can in our own lives. His best qualities, I think, were also what some people would consider his Achilles heel: integrity. He would do the right thing to a fault, and even if it cost him financially, career-wise, he had many opportunities over the years that we know of to better himself financially, but he and you know, as I was his oldest son, he had all about 4 sisters came first, and then the 2 boys came last. But as his oldest son, he would pull me aside and he would try to explain to me, you know, why certain things he did, you know, and I guess kind of grooming me for you know, life as a man and life as a Black man, I guess, in the world. And you know, he said, you know, your word, your integrity are the things that you have, and that's something that nobody can take away from you. They can take many things away. They can take money, they can take this, but they can't take your integrity. So if you give it away or you allow it to be stolen from you, then that's on you. And so he lived his life that way. And you know, my siblings and I laugh about it. You know, there was a situation that we know for sure where he could have become a millionaire, and we're like, wow, can you imagine our life if he had taken that offer? We'd be living in the lap of luxury and all this stuff. But with the benefit of hindsight, I think we all agree that it was the right thing for him to do. And you know, I know I'm okay with the life that I ended up with and the memories that I have of my upbringing. You know, I have several aunts and uncles, and right now my uncle Milton Greaves, my aunt Marjorie Greaves Sherman, my aunt Joyce Greaves Wiklund, who's in Sweden, my aunt Momsey Greaves McCready, and then my auntie Tina, who's in Liberia, back in Liberia as well. And those are the ones who are still living. They're several who have passed away, including my Auntie Marcia, who passed away last year. Um, and we've, it is just, honestly, my grandfather had 3 wives. My grandmother was his first, and he had 2 children who survived by her. And then he then married Ethel Dunbar, and had children by her. And then his last wife was Joetta Hall. Funny how the Hall name came back, but Joetta Hall Greaves, and had 4 children by her. And his last wife, Momi, as we called her, really did a great job of trying to bring together all the children, and not, she accepted all of us, as her grandchildren, and I think that was a great legacy that she left. And she said she remembers him treating her like a doll baby. So that's one of my memories of my grandfather, is that his last wife said that he used to treat her like a doll baby. So
Okay.
And so we've had a lot of people who we established really, cousins and aunts and uncles who established really close relationships because they spent a lot of time, at our houses, or their kids did, because they were there for school or otherwise. So yeah, it's I would say we're a very close knit family too. In 1978, so which was there was a really, it was a hub of activity there at that point. President Talbot was doing a lot of things globally, and was also preparing for the OAU, in the year that following that. So Liberia was a hub of activity. There was so much coming in. I believe Muhammad Ali came to visit, while I was there. There were, it was a place that people came to. It was a place that, when you said that you were from Liberia, there was this, oh, okay, there was a certain cachet associated with being from Liberia, and even I recognized that at age 10, 12. And I remember the school over there, for me was easy and yet hard. I don't know how else to explain it. It was challenging. It was competitive. I had classmates, and many of my classmates from CWA and from J.J. Roberts I'm still in touch with now, which I can't say for almost any other school that I've attended. The longest I had attended any school really in my life was, I think, 2 years. So so I spent 2 years at J.J. Roberts and a year and a half at CWA. But if you ask me what school I went to, of all the schools I've ever been to, I would say I went to CWA, which, to me, that kind of tells you the impact that Liberia, and certainly that school had on me. So for me, it was just the atmosphere of, I remember mangoes. I remember, plum. Let me say the correct Liberian word. I remember my grandmother's house was right next to, it was called T. Choi Tram's supermarket at the time. It's now Greenland Supermarket. At least it was Greenland the last time I was in Liberia. And she had a huge plum tree that used to hang over the building of the supermarket, and there was a pathway that people used to walk between her wall and the supermarket, and people would be throwing rocks to get the best plums from her tree. And it was always a war, because we felt that tree belonged to us. So any plum that we saw that was ripe was for us. And if somebody got rucked and started to try to rob us of our plum, there were problems to be had then. And so it's those types of memories that you have. I remember climbing that tree many times to get, the plum before it got too ripe before somebody else got it. I remember, walking to school to J.J. Roberts from there. We had to take a taxi to when I started going to CWA. I just remember family. I remember that you couldn't go in town and come back home without stopping at least one family member's house. There's always, you go into auntie this or cousin that. And so you always felt connected to your family. And, that's honestly one of the things that I miss about Liberia. And I think that my children and our, the younger generation are missing here because, here, unless you actually purposely go to somebody's house, you may not see people you can. So I think for me, that's one of the fondest memories was just those, those drives and stopping in to this cousin's house and that cousin's house and the food. I mean, you can't, as much as we try to cook Liberian food here in America or in the diaspora, when you go back home and you cook and you eat the food that's grown there, it hits you differently. That's all I can say. And it brings back memories for those of us who, I remember being at J.J. Roberts and the highlight of school, the school day was lunch. Is it Pambada Day today, or is it cassava leaf day, or is it flour sauce day? And so those were the highlights for me. Yeah, it's funny, food and family. It's funny you should ask that because I actually don't have favorites of anything. Yeah, people ask me, what's your favorite color, your favorite this? I don't have favorites except for food. So it's not even Liberian food. My favorite food is flour sauce. Bar none, end of story, full stop. One of the things, I'm currently a partner in a small IT consulting firm that does software development and project management for the federal government, U.S. federal government, I should say. But I took sort of a roundabout way to get there. So my training was in electrical engineering. I took the very nice long route. I graduated high school when I was 17, and thought I was going to be out of college in 4 years. But one of the byproducts of my father being a diplomat, and one of the things that people don't always, hear or think about is that, during those rough years for Liberia, and really, honestly, probably up till now to some degree as well, there were periods when people were not getting paid, period. So my father had 6 children, and four of us were in a row. And at the time that, he was stationed here, my sister Gladys had gotten out of high school. My sister Barbie had graduated from CWA. The year that we moved to Liberia, to the States, my sister Vera was scheduled to graduate that December from CWA, and I was in 11th grade when we left. So it was 4 children in a row who were supposed to be going to college, and there was no money. So what ended up happening was, a lot of stress. My father ended up, he had heart problems, he had diabetes, he had, every known ailment that you can think of, I feel like he had, and was taking medication for it. My mother, on the other hand, had none of these. So I like to think we're very fortunate that we had my mother to balance out what my father brought in terms of the health side of things. And I hope that I'm trending towards my mother's health, the health side. But no, so took the long path to get through college is the bottom line. Then joined corporate America, worked for a company called Global One, which was a joint venture between Deutsche Telekom, France Telecom, and Sprint. Left there to join a .com company, and then left there to join a company that was the precursor to Nielsen Radio. They did the ratings for radio, so it was called Arbitron. And then I left Arbitron to join a company that was in the federal government space doing consulting, and I helped to grow that company until they were sold to another large company, helped to make some people millionaires, and then decided to join another company where I thought I had some good prospects that were in the same space, helped to grow that company again to where it was actually just sold earlier this year for untold sums of money. But 3-4 years ago, decided to join with some partner and start our own business. And so we're, slowly but surely growing. Our household has straddled both cultures. So my children all eat everything spicy, pepper in everything. If we got hamburger, if there's pepper, we're putting pepper on a hamburger, that kind of stuff. So they understand that, but yet they're very much American. But we haven't been to Liberia as much as I would like, but we have traveled back to visit Ghana several times, since that's where my mother my father at the time and mother and now my mother lived. So they have a definite connection to Africa in general, and they are very, very much in tune with their Liberian side and their Ghanaian side, their African side. So I think they appreciate all aspects of their culture, the fact that they have that American connection, but also most definitely they love the culture, the Liberian culture, the Liberianisms. And it's interesting for me to hear my son speak the Liberian English that, that came from him hearing me, his cousins, some of his uncles speaking, and he's carrying it on to the next level. I think my father would want to be remembered as a man of integrity, a man who lived up to his obligations, who said what he was going to do and did what he said he was going to do, a family man, a comedian, definitely had a great sense of humor, and I think that's something many people still remember him for. But just generally and genuinely a good person. Now, having said that, like I said, he was not a pushover by any step of, he was a very strong person, both mentally and physically. He was a very imposing person physically, and I think sometimes he had to temper himself because he could intimidate people physically if he wanted to, but he chose to intimidate people or not intimidate, but to use his language. So I think my father would want to be remembered as a person of integrity, a man of integrity, a man who did what he, said what he would do and then did what he said he would do. A family man, a man who, provided for, did well by his family. And like I said, he was a comedian. He would crack the jokes. He would, there are a lot of people who just remember him as the one who used to crack jokes. And some of us, his children, we sit here and we're like, well, that is he, man, who used to be yelling at us that what you to say. But we acknowledge that, yes, he was definitely a comedian as well. Not a comedian in the sense of, stand-up comedian, but definitely had a great sense of humor. And I think it's a wicked sense of humor. I think that's a better term. And I think it's something that we have all sort of inherited on some level. I think both he and my mother have had different elements of that, and we've picked up different parts of that from both of them. We believe that when the group came from the Cora, that there was at least one relative. We don't know if it was one of the children of Thomas Henry Greaves, or there was another Greaves or Graves on the ship who we believe was related to him, and somebody ended up moving to Ghana, and they became. They married into a Ghanaian family, and they became the Brig Greaves family in Ghana. So there's actually a Barbadian connection to Ghana through Liberia. So I don't know if there's a direct one, but there's certainly one through Liberia with the Brig Greaves family. And we were able to meet Mr. one of the Brig Greaves descendants, maybe about 10 years ago. And so we've made that connection in recent years. So it's just, one of I think looking and doing the research as I've been doing. My sister Barbie, who passed away in 2004, started this genealogy research for us and did a lot of the heavy lifting, honestly. But as we've picked up and as we've learned more and more about our ancestors, and as you then try to put yourself into their frame of mind coming to Liberia, it's amazing what they were able to accomplish. It's amazing what they were able to pass down to their children, their grandchildren, and there's still things that I know that we do, or that I do, that are probably directly brought down from my great-great-grandfather that he brought from Barbados. And so, definitely work ethic, I think, is a major thing. We definitely have a great work ethic in there. And from what I can tell, integrity was a major part of things all through, just from the research that I've done so far. So maybe it's hereditary, maybe genetics does affect integrity. So we should find the integrity gene and try to, inject it into others. So I think that's about all that I had. But I'm excited about making more connections to our family in Barbados. Like I said, we started the walk down the hall side of things, the Adelaide Hall, my great-great-grandmother's side. And hopefully we can make some connections there. And then we're hoping that we can even find, go a few steps back beyond Thomas Henry Greaves and find out who his father was, and, who his father was, and when, ideally to find out when they came from Ireland or from the British Isles to the West Indies. If we can make that jump, I think we'll be able to go a lot further back in terms of tracing our family history. So yeah, the manifest, and I'll just name the names quickly.
Oh, good.
Thomas Henry Greaves, and he was 45 when he came, and he was a tailor. His wife was Adelaide Greaves, and she was 38. They had a daughter who was 18, Susan Thomas Greaves. My great-grandfather, Joshua Greaves, he was 16 when he came. They had another daughter, Mergiana Greaves, who was 14. They had a son, Morrington Greaves, who was 11. And then they had another son, Henry Greaves, who was 8. And then on the other side, I think I said there was a Graves family that I thought might have been related. And that was Isaac Graves, who was a sugar boiler. Rebecca Graves, his wife, he was 39. And his wife, Rebecca Graves, was a seamstress. And then they had their children. George Francis Graves was 18. Mary Elizabeth Graves was 14. And Sarah Jane Graves was 12. Edward Nathaniel Graves was 10. Charles Graves was 7. William Herbert Graves was 8. And Mary Emily Graves was 4. So he came with a whole slew of family members with him. And that's the one, the Graves one is the one I believe went to Ghana.